Hello there, and welcome once again to Echoes of Earth. Tonight, we wander far back into a world unlike anything you have seen. Before continents like Pangaea, before dinosaurs, even before the air itself held the oxygen we breathe today. Before we step into that ancient sky, let's pause for a moment. Where are you listening from right now? Perhaps you're tucked under a soft blanket, the day's noise fading away. Perhaps a dim light flickers beside you, and the world outside seems distant, like a dream. Or maybe you're somewhere entirely different, and yet, through this quiet narrative, we share a moment in time. Wherever you are, whenever you are, this journey is yours to carry. To imagine Earth when oxygen first appeared, we must first understand what the world looked like before it. Close your eyes if you like, and picture a planet young, still restless, still finding its rhythm. Oceans cover the land in vast dark folds, dense and murky, rich with minerals and life forms invisible to the naked eye. Continents are small, fragmented, barely more than islands in a turbulent sea. The sky above is heavy, thick with clouds of methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. No birds trace patterns through the blue. No trees stretch skyward. No flowers colour the land. The air feels foreign, alien, inhospitable to anything we would recognise. And yet, even in that seeming emptiness, life had already begun its quiet work. Not the sprawling forests or roaming creatures we know today, but microscopic organisms, simple and stubborn, clinging to existence along the edges of oceans, in shallow pools, and within mineral-rich sediments. These tiny beings, invisible to us, were the architects of a profound transformation. They would change the very air we breathe, sculpt the chemical canvas of our planet, and set the stage for all life to come. For the first 2 billion years of Earth's history, oxygen was almost entirely absent from the atmosphere. It wasn't missing because the planet forgot it, but because the conditions that could hold free oxygen didn't yet exist. The seas and the rocks themselves eagerly absorbed it. Oxygen, when produced, would vanish almost immediately, reacting with iron and other minerals, creating vast rust-coloured layers on the sea floor. Imagine oceans glowing with dissolved iron, slowly settling into layers of stone, a silent record of chemical conversations we are only beginning to understand. And then, slowly, imperceptibly, the balance began to shift. Cyanobacteria, tiny, blue-green architects of life, developed a remarkable ability. Through the process we call photosynthesis, they began to capture sunlight and, in doing so, release oxygen as a byproduct. At first, the oxygen they produced went largely unnoticed, absorbed by oceans and rocks, building invisible stores of energy in the chemical lattice of the planet itself. But over millions of years, the production outpaced absorption. The atmosphere, once heavy and alien, began to feel the first breaths of a new element, oxygen. Think about that for a moment. The very air we take for granted today, the invisible thread connecting every living thing, was once a rare, precious novelty. It gathered quietly, almost shyly, until one day it changed everything. Entire species of microbes vanished, unable to survive the new, oxygen-rich world. And yet, other life forms flourished, adapted, and evolved in ways unimaginable before that shift. As we walk through this time, we will see oceans glowing with chemical reactions, continents still fractured and wandering, skies shifting composition and color. We'll meet life forms that never left fossils, whose only traces are chemical fingerprints etched into stone. And we'll see how those small, unseen organisms, mere specks in a vast world, altered the course of Earth's history forever. But first, we must look deeper into the early Earth itself. Picture a planet bombarded by asteroids, its surface molten in places, oceans simmering with heat and minerals. Volcanoes breathe smoke into the sky, spewing gases that mingle to form the earliest atmosphere. Lightning dances across endless storms, triggering chemical reactions that make life possible. In this volatile crucible, life emerged, persistent and patient, shaping the planet as much as it was shaped by it. The story of oxygen is also the story of Earth itself, of rocks, oceans, atmosphere, and the delicate interplay between them. Each element, each mineral, each microorganism contributed to a slow, inexorable transformation. And as we explore, we will notice that this story is not just about chemistry, but about time, patience, and the incredible resilience of life in its simplest forms. So as we linger in these early oceans, in this alien atmosphere, keep your senses open. Imagine the silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic motion of waves and the invisible hum of microscopic life. Imagine the first whispers of oxygen spreading through the seas, touching iron, stone, and air, slowly weaving a new world into existence. Tonight, we step into that delicate, pivotal moment in Earth's history. The Great Oxidation Event is on the horizon, the first deep breath of a planet that will one day teem with life as we know it. And though billions of years separate us from that time, through imagination, through evidence, and through the quiet persistence of science, we can wander there together. As we linger in the oceans of early Earth, we begin to notice subtle changes, almost imperceptible at first. Tiny traces of oxygen, once absorbed almost immediately by iron and other minerals, began to persist. The seas, once dark and brimming with dissolved iron, gradually gave way to rust-colored layers, massive beds of iron oxides quietly recording the chemical shifts taking place. These deposits, called banded iron formations, are like the fingerprints of a planet learning to breathe. Picture it, oceans glowing faintly with iron, vast stretches of seabed turning slowly reddish-brown, a world where chemical reactions move at geological tempos, far beyond the pace of human life. Life at this time was entirely microbial, yet astonishingly inventive. Cyanobacteria, the tiny architects of oxygen, multiplied in shallow waters where sunlight penetrated, their photosynthetic activity releasing oxygen that began to saturate the surrounding seas. Each microscopic cell contributed to a transformation so immense that it would define the future of Earth. But this change did not come gently. Oxygen, as it turned out, was both a gift and a challenge. For many microorganisms that had thrived in oxygen-free waters, it was toxic. Billions of tiny lives vanished, driven extinct by a gas that would one day sustain the vast diversity of life. It was the first mass extinction, though invisible to the eye, unfolding in the chemical shadows of the oceans. Yet for other life forms, oxygen opened doors previously closed, enabling new metabolic pathways and creating opportunities for evolution to flourish. The atmosphere above was transforming too, though slowly. Nitrogen and carbon dioxide still dominated, but oxygen was beginning to accumulate. Paleontologists and geochemists can read this story in ancient rocks, where traces of oxidized minerals hint at the increasing presence of oxygen in the air. Imagine standing on the shore of a primordial ocean, breathing an atmosphere unlike the one we know today, thin, hazy, and gradually enriched with a new gas that would ultimately shape every living being on the planet. One of the most remarkable aspects of this period is the scale of time. Oxygen did not appear overnight. Millions of years passed before it reached significant levels in the atmosphere. The Great Oxidation Event, which occurred around 2.4 billion years ago, represents a tipping point, a moment when the cumulative efforts of countless microorganisms finally altered the global environment. Before this event, oxygen was a minor, fleeting presence. After it, the stage was set for complexity, for the eventual rise of multicellular life, for the ecosystems that would fill Earth with color, sound, and motion. As the atmosphere shifted, so did the chemistry of the oceans. Dissolved iron precipitated out, forming new rock layers. Sulfur and other elements reacted with oxygen in ways that reshaped the nutrient cycles that life depended upon. These changes were slow, measured over millions of years, but they were profound. They rewrote the rules of life, setting the constraints and possibilities for evolution to follow. And yet, even as oxygen spread, the planet remained volatile. Volcanoes erupted, spewing gases and ash into the atmosphere. Continents drifted slowly across the globe. The sun shone slightly less brightly than today, and Earth's climate teetered between extremes. It was a world of tension and balance, where every chemical reaction mattered. Every microscopic life form played a role, and the trajectory of the planet hung on subtle shifts in its environment. To imagine this time is to stretch our minds beyond human scales. We can picture cyanobacteria clinging to rocks in shallow waters, the surface of the ocean shimmering with their collective activity. We can imagine vast layers of iron settling to the seabed, recording the silent work of chemistry over millions of years. We can sense the first breath of oxygen entering an atmosphere that had never known it, slowly altering the very air that would one day fill the lungs of every living creature. And here, in the silence of those early oceans, lies a profound lesson that even the smallest, simplest forms of life can shape a planet. That tiny organisms, invisible to our eyes, can alter the composition of oceans, the chemistry of rocks, and the atmosphere itself. That Earth is not static, but a dynamic system, constantly reshaped by the interplay of life and the environment. As we move forward in time, we will see the effects of this shift more clearly. Oxygen levels fluctuated, oceans underwent cycles of change, and life evolved in new and unexpected directions. Some organisms adapted to the presence of oxygen, finding ways to harness it for energy, to thrive where others perished. Others disappeared entirely, leaving only chemical traces behind. Through all of this, Earth's story is one of gradual transformation, of patience, of processes unfolding over timescales almost impossible to imagine. The Great Oxidation Event is not just a moment in history. It is a reminder that life and planet are inseparable, each shaping the other in ways both subtle and monumental. And so, as we linger on the edge of these ancient seas, let us take a moment to appreciate the quiet drama of a planet learning to breathe. The first whispers of oxygen, barely noticeable at first, would eventually create the conditions for everything we know and love about life today. From the smallest microbe to the tallest tree, from the tiniest fish to the creatures that roam our lands, all owe their existence to this pivotal, invisible transformation. As oxygen continued to accumulate in Earth's atmosphere and oceans, life was forced to adapt or vanish. Imagine a world where the very air that now sustains us was once a deadly toxin to most organisms. The first true mass extinction had already begun, not with roaring predators or cataclysmic impacts, but quietly, invisibly, at the microscopic level. Microbes that thrived in oxygen-free environments found themselves exposed to a new chemical reality. Many perished, unable to detoxify the very substance now saturating their world. Yet for some, oxygen was an opportunity. Certain microorganisms developed ways to harness its energy, transforming it into fuel through cellular respiration. This innovation was revolutionary, allowing life to extract far more energy from the same nutrients than before. In a sense, oxygen became both a challenge and a gift, a force that reshaped evolution itself. Those tiny, resilient life forms set the stage for complexity, enabling the eventual rise of organisms made not of single cells, but of many, working together in delicate cooperation. The oceans, meanwhile, mirrored this transformation. Layers of iron precipitated out, creating massive deposits of banded iron formations, which can still be seen in rock layers today. These deposits are a geological record of oxygen's first experiments, a testament to the chemical dialogue between life and planet. It's as if the Earth itself kept a diary, written in mineral and stone, detailing the slow awakening of a planet that had never breathed before. And the atmosphere above was changing too. Oxygen levels were far from what we have today, but even small increases had profound effects. With rising oxygen came the formation of the ozone layer, a protective shield that filtered harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun. This allowed life to begin contemplating ever so slowly, leaving the oceans behind and exploring the land, a journey that would take hundreds of millions of years, but one that began here, in the interplay of gas and microbe. These chemical changes also influence Earth's climate. Oxygen, interacting with methane and other greenhouse gases, may have contributed to episodes of global cooling, even ice ages, long before humans walked the planet. The Earth was learning to balance itself, responding to the presence of oxygen in ways that would reverberate across deep time. Each reaction, each interaction between living organisms and the environment was part of an intricate dance, slow, subtle, yet profound in consequence. And what of life itself? Though the world was still dominated by microbes, their diversity was growing. Photosynthetic organisms thrived in shallow seas, while anaerobic microbes, those that avoided oxygen, retreated to isolated niches. Metabolic innovation was rampant. Some life forms learned to use oxygen to extract more energy from food, while others experimented with different chemical pathways, preparing the blueprint for future complexity. Evolution was no longer just a story of survival. It had become a story of chemical mastery, of adaptation to a world transformed. Imagine standing on the shores of a primordial ocean at this time. The water shimmers in the faint sunlight, tinted red with dissolved iron, streaked with the invisible activity of countless microbes. Tiny mats of cyanobacteria ripple gently with the current. Above, the sky slowly changes composition, the first hints of oxygen mingling with nitrogen, hinting at the air we would one day breathe. Silence dominates, yet it is a silence alive with chemical and biological drama, a quiet revolution shaping every atom of the world around you. And it is here that we see a profound truth. Even the smallest forms of life can alter the entire planet. Microbes, invisible and often overlooked, became architects of Earth's future. They sculpted oceans, reshaped the atmosphere, and laid the foundations for the explosion of complex life that would come much later. The story of oxygen is inseparable from the story of life itself, a reminder that even tiny actions, sustained over vast spans of time, can create transformations of unimaginable scale. So, as we drift through this ancient world, let us reflect on the power of persistence. Oxygen, once scarce and deadly, became a tool, a building block, a medium for innovation. Life adapted, evolved, and persisted, teaching us that transformation often begins in silence, at scales invisible to our eyes. The Great Oxidation Event was more than a chemical shift. It was the first deep breath of a planet that would one day teem with life in every corner, from the oceans to the skies. And as we prepare to move forward, let us remember that this story does not end here. The rise of oxygen set the stage for new worlds, new ecosystems, and new possibilities. It was the beginning of a planet slowly learning to sustain complexity, to balance life and chemistry in an intricate, ongoing dialogue that continues to this day. As oxygen spread through oceans and atmosphere, Earth began wearing a new face, slowly, quietly, over millions of years. The once dark seas, thick with iron and minerals, became layered with chemical signatures of this transformation. Red beds, sedimentary rocks tinted with iron oxides, started appearing on the continents, a visible testament to the invisible gas reshaping the planet. These red-streaked landscapes, silent and unchanging to the human eye, were the markers of a monumental shift. Oxygen had finally begun to leave its lasting imprint on the land itself. Beneath the surface, life responded. Microbes that had learned to thrive in oxygen-free conditions were forced into refuges, isolated pockets of oceans, stagnant lagoons, or deep sediments where oxygen could not reach. But other organisms embraced the challenge. Aerobic respiration, using oxygen to release energy more efficiently, allowed cells to grow larger and more complex. For the first time, life had the energy budget to explore multicellularity, the cooperative integration of many cells into a single organism. Imagine the oceans then, microbial mats stretching across shallow waters, their surfaces alive with oxygen production. Within these mats, some cells began forming simple colonies, coordinating activities in ways never seen before. These tiny experiments in cooperation laid the groundwork for future organisms composed of many cells, each specialized for particular tasks. Life was no longer constrained to single-cell simplicity. It was beginning to reach for something more. On the continents, red beds quietly recorded oxygen's advance. Layers of iron-rich sediment tell the story of an atmosphere no longer dominated solely by nitrogen and carbon dioxide, but enriched with oxygen, interacting with the crust itself. Rocks that were once dull and grey now gleamed faintly red under ancient suns, an enduring geological signature of life's chemical influence. Each mineral, each stratum, is a page in the diary of a world learning to breathe. The atmosphere above also continued to evolve. Oxygen interacted with ultraviolet light to form ozone, gradually creating a protective layer that shielded the surface from the sun's harshest radiation. This allowed the eventual exploration of land, providing a safe haven for life to leave the oceans behind. Though the land was still barren, rocky, and windswept, it was no longer hostile in the same way it had been. The conditions were slowly aligning for more complex organisms to emerge and experiment with new habitats. But the story of oxygen is not only about life, it is about balance, tension, and planetary feedbacks. With oxygen accumulating, methane levels in the atmosphere decreased, since oxygen reacts with methane, a potent greenhouse gas. The result may have been episodes of global cooling, hinting at ice ages long before the Cambrian or any familiar glaciations. Climate, life, and chemistry were intertwined in a delicate web. The tiniest changes in microbial activity could ripple across the planet, altering temperature, ocean chemistry, and the course of evolution. In these ancient seas, life experimented. Microbes diversified, some adapting to low oxygen niches, others thriving in its presence. Some began forming filaments or colonies, structures that allowed cooperation and shared resources. Oxygen, once deadly to many, became a catalyst for innovation, enabling life to explore complexity in ways previously impossible. This set the stage for the first multicellular organisms, tiny, simple, but profound in their implications. And so, as we drift through this quiet, ancient world, we see the slow unfolding of one of Earth's greatest stories. Life, invisible to the eye, shapes the planet. Chemistry, unobserved by humans, reshapes life. Oceans, atmosphere, and continents are all participants in a dialogue that stretches across millions of years. And in this dialogue, oxygen plays a central role, a transformative, invisible force that quietly prepared the world for the explosion of diversity that would come much later. The Earth of this time is alien yet familiar. Its seas shimmer with microbial life. Its rocks streak red with chemical traces of oxygen, and its atmosphere begins to resemble the air we know today, if only faintly. It is a world of experimentation and transformation, where tiny cells teach the planet to breathe, and where slow, patient processes lay the groundwork for everything that will follow. And as we prepare to step forward in time, we will witness the first experiments in multicellularity, the earliest ecosystems forming in shallow waters, and the continued interplay between life and chemistry that shapes every corner of the planet. Oxygen once scarce and dangerous, is now the architect of possibility, quietly preparing Earth for a future filled with colour, motion, and life as we recognize it. As oxygen steadily spread through the oceans, life began to experiment with new forms. No longer constrained to single cells, organisms started to assemble into simple multicellular structures. Imagine tiny colonies of cells, each specialized for a specific role, some gathering sunlight, others processing nutrients, all working in silent cooperation. These early experiments in teamwork were subtle, invisible to the human eye, yet profound in their implications. They marked the first steps toward the diversity of life that would eventually fill every ocean, every landmass, and every niche on the planet. The shallow seas of early Earth became laboratories for this biological innovation. Microbial mats stretched across continental shelves, their surfaces alive with oxygen production and chemical activity. Within these mats, tiny multicellular organisms navigated a landscape of nutrients and sunlight, competing and cooperating in ways that laid the groundwork for evolution on a larger scale. Life was beginning to sculpt its environment even as the environment sculpted it. With oxygen in the atmosphere, chemical reactions within the oceans shifted dramatically. Metals precipitated, nutrients cycled differently, and new chemical gradients formed. These gradients created microhabitats, small zones where conditions varied just enough to allow life to specialize. Some organisms adapted to oxygen-rich waters near the surface, basking in sunlight and harnessing energy efficiently. Others found refuge in low oxygen pockets, learning to survive in harsher conditions. This partitioning of the environment encouraged diversification, setting the stage for an explosion of complexity millions of years later. The very chemistry of Earth was in dialogue with life. As oxygen reacted with iron, sulfur, and other elements, the planet's crust and oceans were slowly reshaped. Vast deposits of iron and sulfur formed on the seafloor, marking the passage of time in layers of stone. In these layers, the silent work of early life was recorded, a diary written not in words, but in minerals, in the quiet testimony of a planet learning to sustain complexity. And though life remained small and largely hidden from view, the first visible signs of multicellular organisms began to appear. Simple, soft-bodied forms, perhaps resembling tiny ribbons or spheres, drifted in shallow waters. Their shapes were modest, their motion slight, yet they represented a monumental step forward. For the first time, life had moved beyond solitary cells, exploring collaboration, specialization, and coordination. These organisms were the ancestors of everything that would later roam oceans, walk on land, or fly through the sky. Meanwhile, the oxygenated atmosphere was slowly altering the climate. Ultraviolet radiation was filtered more effectively by the growing ozone layer, making surface waters safer for life. Methane, a potent greenhouse gas, reacted with oxygen, leading to cooling events that may have triggered glaciations. Earth was in flux, a planet balancing chemical reactions, atmospheric shifts, and the energy of life itself. Every small change mattered, rippling across millions of years to shape the trajectory of evolution. As we drift through this quiet, ancient seascape, imagine the first multicellular organisms navigating their world. Sunlight dapples the shallow waters. Tiny currents stir nutrients. Oxygen, once deadly to many, now fuels metabolic processes that allow for growth and cooperation. It is a slow, almost imperceptible dance, yet it is the foundation of the rich tapestry of life that will eventually follow. And here lies a remarkable truth. Even before animals, before plants, before the forests and reefs we now know, Earth was a dynamic, changing system. Microbes and early multicellular life experimented endlessly, responding to oxygen, to chemistry, to energy, and to one another. They were shaping not only their own survival, but the very structure of the planet, setting the stage for ecosystems that would one day teem with color, motion, and complexity. So as we continue this journey through the deep past, remember that the rise of oxygen was more than a chemical shift. It was a catalyst for life's creativity, a quiet force that encouraged collaboration, experimentation, and adaptation. It was the invisible hand guiding Earth toward the extraordinary diversity of life we see today, even if it took billions of years to arrive. And as we prepare to move forward, the next chapters of this story will reveal how these early experiments in multicellularity led to increasingly complex ecosystems, the first predators, and the eventual explosion of life forms that transformed the oceans into dynamic, bustling habitats. The stage is set, the actors are emerging, and the drama of life is ready to unfold on a planet that has learned, slowly, patiently, to breathe. As oxygen continued its gradual accumulation, life gained newfound energy. Microbes alone could no longer exhaust the possibilities of this planet. Multicellular organisms, small but increasingly sophisticated, began to explore ways to move, interact, and compete. The oceans, once a relatively uniform expanse, transformed into a dynamic environment where life could specialize, adapt, and diversify. Imagine the first predators emerging, tiny, soft-bodied creatures gliding through shallow waters. Their prey, other multicellular organisms, responded with defensive adaptations, thicker surfaces, more flexible shapes, or subtle evasive movements. These early interactions were modest in scale, almost imperceptible, yet they marked the beginning of the ecological arms race, the first hints of behavior, strategy, and survival beyond mere chemical reactions. Oxygen had provided the fuel for this evolution, allowing cells to grow larger, move more effectively, and develop coordinated responses. The influence of oxygen was profound. With more energy available through aerobic respiration, organisms could support more cells, invest in specialized structures, and increase mobility. Some developed rudimentary appendages, allowing them to navigate currents or capture food. Others experimented with filters or nets, collecting nutrients from the surrounding water. These first experiments in form and function were tiny steps that would eventually lead to the astonishing diversity of marine life in later eons. Oceans themselves were responding to these changes. Oxygenated waters allowed for greater chemical stability, supporting ecosystems capable of sustaining a wider range of organisms. Nutrient cycling became more efficient as decomposers processed organic matter with oxygen-driven metabolism. Habitats diversified from shallow, sunlit shelves to slightly deeper waters with variable oxygen levels. Each zone provided opportunities for life to specialize, laying the groundwork for ecological complexity. And yet, the world remained alien. Sunlight filtered differently through the hazy atmosphere. The water carried dissolved minerals in concentrations we would find unusual today, and the sea floor itself was still a landscape of chemical reactions. Banded iron formations, once dominant, became less frequent as oxygen reached new chemical equilibrium, but their legacy remained, a reminder of the planet's long struggle to transition from a reducing to an oxidizing environment. In this environment, the first true multicellular innovations appeared. Organisms began to form coordinated tissues, where certain cells performed specialized functions, gathering energy, supporting structure, or protecting against predators. Though simple, these arrangements represented a leap forward in biological complexity. Life was no longer only reactive. It was increasingly proactive, shaping its interactions, exploring strategies, and defining its ecological roles. Predation, though modest at first, accelerated evolutionary innovation. The threat of being consumed drove rapid experimentation. Shells, spines, mobility, and chemical defenses all emerged. These early predator-prey dynamics fostered diversity, encouraging novel forms and behaviors. Oxygen had made it possible, providing the metabolic power necessary to support movement, sensory structures, and coordinated responses. Above the water, the atmosphere slowly matured. Oxygen levels continued to rise in fits and starts, buffered by interactions with methane, iron, and organic matter. These fluctuations influence climate and ocean chemistry, indirectly guiding the evolutionary pathways of life below. The planet was a feedback system where the energy of oxygen, the chemistry of the oceans, and the persistence of life intertwined in subtle yet profound ways. And so, as we drift through these early oceans, we witness life experimenting boldly yet quietly. Small creatures navigate chemical and physical landscapes. Predators and prey engage in the first evolutionary contests, and multicellular life explores size, structure, and behavior. The Great Oxidation Event, once an invisible chemical shift, had now catalyzed a biological revolution, preparing the stage for future complexities we can only imagine. From these humble beginnings, the trajectory toward more sophisticated ecosystems, greater mobility, and larger body sizes was set. Oxygen was no longer a rare novelty. It had become the engine of evolutionary possibility, allowing life to stretch its potential in ways previously impossible. And though the seas remained alien to us, they were vibrant, dynamic, and alive with the first whispers of ecological drama. As the eons unfolded, oxygen had firmly established itself as a vital component of Earth's oceans and atmosphere. The energy it provided allowed life to grow not just more complex, but also larger. Small multicellular organisms began experimenting with scale, their bodies becoming visible, tangible structures rather than invisible colonies. This period of slow experimentation set the stage for the Ediacaran period, roughly 635 to 541 million years ago, where some of the first macroscopic organisms appeared. Imagine floating through these ancient seas. Sunlight filters down through water, tinged with dissolved minerals, illuminating soft-bodied creatures that gently sway with the currents. Some resemble flattened discs, others elongated ribbons, moving ever so slightly as they interact with the ocean around them. They have no bones, no shells, yet their very existence signals a profound leap in the possibilities for life. These are the Ediacaran biota, the first large organisms whose forms are both alien and mesmerizing. Oxygen was key to their emergence. Aerobic metabolism allowed these organisms to support more cells, coordinate movements, and maintain structural integrity. Without the slow accumulation of oxygen over billions of years, these early macroscopic forms would never have been possible. They were exploring the limits of size, experimenting with ways to survive, feed, and interact in a world that remained, in many ways, alien to our senses. The oceans were becoming increasingly structured. Oxygenated surface waters contrasted with lower oxygen depths, creating chemical gradients that organisms could exploit. Nutrients cycled efficiently through microbial mats, decomposers, and chemical interactions, providing the foundation for ecological niches. Some Ediacaran organisms likely grazed on microbial layers, while others absorbed nutrients directly from seawater. Predation remained limited, but was emerging, encouraging adaptations in shape, mobility, and behavior. Life's first large experiments were subtle, slow, and fragile. Fossil evidence shows impressions in sediment rather than hard parts, delicate traces of movement, growth, and interaction. Yet within these soft forms lies an extraordinary story. a world where oxygen, chemistry, and biological innovation converge to allow life to leave its microscopic origins behind. These creatures hint at behaviors that would later define ecosystems: competition for resources, spatial organization, and perhaps even early forms of communication or coordinated movement. Above the oceans, the atmosphere had become more stable, buffered by the oxygen and nitrogen balance established over millions of years. Ozone filtered harmful radiation, allowing shallow waters to be safe for macroscopic life, while deeper waters remain low in oxygen, providing refuge for species still adapted to the old world. The stage was now set for a slow yet dramatic increase in diversity and complexity, a prelude to the Cambrian explosion that would follow tens of millions of years later. And so, as we drift among the Ediacaran seas, it becomes clear that oxygen did more than change chemistry. It changed the very scale at which life could operate. The first large organisms, gentle and alien, remind us that every leap in evolution builds upon countless small steps. The microscopic architects of oxygen had paved the way for this new world, where size, structure, and interaction could flourish in ways never before possible. In this silent, primeval ocean, we witness life reaching for new possibilities. Each organism, however simple, represents an experiment in survival, growth, and adaptation. Oxygen fuels metabolism, drives growth, and enables cooperation among cells. Predation, mobility, and environmental complexity emerge, hinting at the intricate dance of ecosystems yet to come. As we leave the Ediacaran seas behind, we carry with us a crucial understanding. The rise of oxygen was the slow, quiet engine behind the rise of visible, macroscopic life. It transformed the invisible microbial world into a realm where bodies could grow, move, and interact in profound ways. And in doing so, it set the stage for the extraordinary diversity of life that would soon follow. As we approach the Cambrian period, around 541 million years ago, the world is already a place transformed by billions of years of chemical and biological work. Oxygen has accumulated steadily, first in the oceans, then in the atmosphere, slowly creating conditions that allow life to grow larger, move faster, and interact more dynamically than ever before. The stage is set for a transformation so profound that it will mark the beginning of visible, macroscopic life, the Cambrian explosion. Imagine drifting gently over a shallow, sunlit ocean, the waters tinged faintly green by the lingering presence of photosynthetic microbes, while sunlight filters down in gentle shafts, illuminating the subtle ripples of the sea floor. In this quiet, ancient world, movement has become possible, and with movement comes interaction. Tiny predators, perhaps no larger than a fingernail, glides silently over microbial mats, probing and testing the waters for food. Prey organisms, equally small and delicate, respond with subtle defensive shifts, altering their shape or curling to avoid consumption. This is the first true ecological dance, unfolding slowly, imperceptibly, over days, months, and millennia. Yet each motion carries consequences that will echo through time. The oceans themselves have become increasingly structured, layered not only physically but chemically. Oxygen-rich waters occupy the surface, warmed by sunlight and stirred by gentle currents. Below, pockets of lower oxygen water persist, refuges for organisms still adapted to the earlier, less hospitable conditions. Nutrients cycle through these layers with quiet efficiency, moved by microbial activity and the slow decay of organic matter. In this stratified environment, organisms begin to specialize, exploiting the microhabitats available to them. Some graze on microbial mats at the surface, while others burrow slightly into sediment, extracting nutrients in subtle, efficient ways. Oxygen is the energy currency that fuels all of this, providing life with the ability to grow larger, sustain movement, and explore ecological niches that had previously been inaccessible. As we observe this world more closely, we see the first real signs of innovation in body plans. Organisms begin developing primitive hard parts, calcium carbonate shells, simple spines, and protective ridges. These are not yet the complex skeletons of later periods, but they represent experimentation with structure, the first attempt to resist predation and survive longer in a dynamic environment. It is fascinating to consider that these modest, soft beginnings lay the foundation for all later diversity in body forms. Life is learning, adapting, and innovating, one subtle step at a time. Predation, which had previously been minimal or non-existent, now begins to influence evolution directly. The predator-to-prey dynamic drives subtle yet profound changes. Prey species develop defensive adaptations, thicker skins, protective ridges, or small spikes. Predators, in turn, respond with greater mobility, more efficient feeding mechanisms, or the ability to detect movement more acutely. This arms race is slow, almost imperceptible in real time, but over thousands and millions of years, it drives innovation and diversification at an astonishing pace. The Cambrian seas are alive with quiet motion. Tiny filter feeders drift in gentle currents, sifting particles from the water. Grazers navigate the sea floor, leaving faint tracks in soft sediment. Burrowers tunnel beneath the surface, aerating the sediment and altering its chemistry. Predators glide silently, seeking prey that must adapt or perish. Each organism, each movement, contributes to an emergent ecological structure, a network of interactions supported entirely by the metabolic energy that oxygen makes possible. Above the water, the atmosphere has stabilized in its oxygen-nitrogen balance. The protective ozone layer filters out harmful ultraviolet radiation, allowing the shallow waters to be hospitable to new forms of life. Life is no longer constrained to a narrow range of chemical conditions. It can experiment, explore, and occupy new habitats with relative safety. The seas are layered ecosystems, stratified not just by depth, but by oxygen availability, nutrient concentration, and sunlight penetration. This structure, subtle and dynamic, provides a template for the complex marine ecosystems that will evolve in the following millions of years. Life in these oceans is also beginning to influence its environment in more pronounced ways. Burrowing organisms ventilate sediments, introducing oxygen and altering nutrient cycling. Grazers maintain microbial mats, preventing overgrowth and encouraging spatial diversity. Predators selectively cull populations, influencing community composition and encouraging evolutionary innovation. Oxygen, while an invisible chemical, is the thread that links these processes, providing the energy that enables activity, complexity, and interaction. Visualize a day in the Cambrian seas. Sunlight penetrates the shallow waters, casting long, gentle rays. A small predator glides over a microbial mat, its movement barely disturbing the sediment. Its prey senses the approach and curls slightly, changing shape to avoid capture. Elsewhere, a burrower slowly digs beneath the sediment, creating a tunnel that aerates the layer and allows nutrients to circulate. Filter feeders drift above, capturing particles in tiny, coordinated motions. It is a quiet world, yet it is alive with innovation, adaptation, and the slow emergence of ecological complexity. The rise of oxygen allows organisms to explore size and behavior in ways previously impossible. Cells can sustain more energy, support more complex tissues, and coordinate responses to the environment. Muscular movement becomes feasible, enabling locomotion and more sophisticated interaction. Sensory structures begin to appear, allowing organisms to detect light, movement, or chemical signals in their surroundings. These innovations are subtle, incremental, and almost invisible on the scale of a single day, but over eons, they accumulate, creating the foundation for the diversity of life that will follow. Oxygen also facilitates the diversification of feeding strategies. Grazing, filtering, scavenging, and predation become viable, allowing organisms to exploit resources more efficiently and occupy ecological niches with increasing specialization. Energy-intensive behaviors, such as rapid movement to capture prey or escape predators, become sustainable. The chemical and biological environment has reached a balance that allows life not only to survive, but to experiment boldly with new forms and strategies. And yet, the Cambrian seas remain alien in many ways. Water chemistry is still different from today. Mineral concentrations fluctuate, and sunlight penetrates differently through the shallow, nutrient-rich waters. The seafloor is soft, shaped by the slow deposition of sediments and the activity of burrowing organisms. Fossilized traces from this period, preserved as impressions and tracks, provide glimpses into this world, revealing behavior, movement, and the subtle interactions that define these early ecosystems. As we drift through this ancient seascape, the profound influence of oxygen becomes clear. It is not simply a gas. It is a driver of evolution, an enabler of innovation, and the engine behind ecological complexity. The arms race of predator and prey, the layering of ecosystems, and the expansion of behavioral possibilities all depend upon this molecule. Oxygen allows life to break free from microscopic simplicity and explore form, function, and interaction at new scales. And so, the Cambrian period emerges not as a sudden burst, but as the culmination of billions of years of chemical and biological preparation. Oxygen has quietly transformed the oceans and atmosphere, creating conditions that make complexity possible. Predation, mobility, specialization, and ecological interaction all find support in this newly enriched environment. Life is no longer passive. It is an active force, shaping the planet even as the planet shapes it. We leave the Cambrian seas with a deep understanding. Oxygen is both a catalyst and a constraint, enabling life to reach unprecedented levels of complexity while imposing limits that drive adaptation. The stage is set for further expansion, diversification, and the eventual colonization of land. In the quiet, sunlit waters of the early Cambrian, life experiments, evolves, and thrives, guided by the invisible hand of oxygen. As the Cambrian seas continue to evolve, life is no longer constrained to small, simple forms. Oxygen, steadily accumulated over billions of years, has become a powerful enabler, allowing organisms to explore new strategies, occupy new spaces, and develop greater complexity than ever before. The oceans are now alive with subtle motion and intricate interaction, a world where every movement has meaning and every organism plays a role in the emerging tapestry of ecosystems. Imagine floating above a shallow continental shelf, sunlight filtering through gently undulating waters, casting shifting patterns on the sea floor below. The sediment is soft but alive, dotted with the traces of burrowing organisms, small holes where filter feeders extract nutrients, and faint trails marking the movements of grazers. Here, the first structured ecosystems have taken shape. Layers of life, some visible, some barely perceptible, interact in a delicate balance that has been billions of years in the making. Predation has now become a major force shaping evolution. tiny predators move through the water with subtle precision, hunting grazers and early filter feeders. Their prey respond with increasing sophistication, curling, retracting, or using simple spines for defense. These small adaptations, though subtle in the moment, accumulate over millennia to produce astonishing diversity in form, behavior, and strategy. Predation is the invisible sculptor of life, carving the contours of ecosystems with patient persistence. Oxygen continues to power this transformation. With higher energy availability, organisms can support larger body sizes, more complex tissues, and greater mobility. Muscles and primitive appendages allow movement across the sea floor, in the water column, and even for the first tentative excursions into burrows and crevices. Sensory organs, primitive eyes, tactile sensors, and chemical detectors allow organisms to perceive their surroundings in increasingly sophisticated ways. The Cambrian oceans are alive with activity, subtle yet profound, as life begins to experiment with new forms of interaction. Nutrient cycling becomes more intricate as organisms interact with sediments and each other. Burrowers aerate the seafloor, allowing oxygen and nutrients to penetrate deeper layers. Grazers maintain microbial mats, preventing overgrowth and encouraging spatial heterogeneity. Predators, in turn, regulate populations, indirectly shaping the availability of resources for other organisms. Oxygen, though invisible, is the energy that sustains this dynamic web, linking chemical processes, biological activity, and ecological complexity in a seamless network. The emergence of skeletonized organisms further reshapes the ecosystem. Hard parts, composed of calcium carbonate or phosphate, provide protection, structural support, and the potential for larger body plans. These adaptations allow organisms to explore new behaviors, burrowing deeper, grazing more effectively, or moving more confidently through the water column. Shells, spines, and protective ridges are not merely defensive. They are enablers of ecological experimentation, supporting behaviors and interactions that would have been impossible in a soft-bodied world. Visualize the sea floor as a gently shifting landscape, alive with activity. Trilobites crawl across sediment, their segmented bodies moving with precision as they graze on microbial mats or avoid predators. Primitive echinoderms cling to surfaces, filtering particles from the water with slow, methodical movements. Sponges anchor themselves in place, drawing nutrients through their porous bodies. Burrows and tracks crisscross the sediment, a record of movement, behavior, and interaction. Each organism contributes to a layered ecosystem, where life and environment co-create the structure of the habitat. Oxygen enables metabolic innovations that support these interactions. Aerobic respiration provides more energy than fermentation, fueling movement, growth, and reproductive success. Organisms can maintain more complex tissues, support sensory structures, and develop specialized appendages. The chemical energy of oxygen translates into ecological possibility, allowing life to explore behaviors, niches, and interactions that were previously unimaginable. Complex food webs begin to form. Grazers feed on microbial mats. Filter feeders extract suspended nutrients. Predators hunt both grazers and other predators. And scavengers recycle organic matter from the sea floor. Each trophic level is supported by oxygen-fueled metabolism, allowing energy to flow efficiently through the ecosystem. Interactions are subtle yet profound, creating a dynamic balance that allows ecosystems to stabilize, diversify, and expand. The Cambrian oceans also witness experimentation in reproductive strategies. Some organisms release eggs into the water, relying on currents for dispersal, while others develop more localized protective approaches. These reproductive innovations, powered by oxygen-fueled energy reserves, enable life to colonize new spaces, adapt to environmental variations, and explore increasingly complex life histories. Even environmental structures respond to life. Sediments are reworked by burrowers. Oxygen penetrates previously anoxic layers, and microbial mats are grazed down, creating patches of open sediment. Life and environment are entwined in a continuous feedback loop, each influencing the other in subtle, long-term ways. The Cambrian oceans are a system of interdependent processes where chemistry, geology, and biology converge to produce unprecedented complexity. Movement, too, becomes a central feature of these ecosystems. Swimming, crawling, burrowing, and floating all emerge as energy-intensive behaviors powered by oxygen. Organisms interact with currents, light gradients, and sediment structures, creating spatial complexity and driving further innovation. The ability to move effectively allows organisms to escape predators, seek food, and explore new niches. Each motion, though small, contributes to the overall dynamics of the ecosystem, reinforcing the role of oxygen as a driver of life's innovation. Oxygen also indirectly shapes ecological diversity by influencing climate and ocean chemistry. Increased oxygen levels reduce methane concentrations, stabilize temperatures, and allow stratification of oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor zones in the ocean. These gradients create a mosaic of habitats, each supporting unique communities of organisms. Life can specialize, adapt, and diversify in ways that would have been impossible in a chemically uniform world. As we drift among these thriving ecosystems, it becomes evident that oxygen is more than a chemical. It is the engine behind ecological and evolutionary complexity. From small predators testing their prey, to burrowers aerating sediments, to grazers maintaining microbial mats, every organism's activity is intertwined with oxygen availability. The Cambrian oceans are alive, dynamic, and interconnected, a testament to the subtle yet transformative power of a single molecule. Consider the subtle interactions that define this world. A trilobite pauses, sensing the approach of a predator. It curls slightly, using its exoskeleton for protection, then resumes movement across the seafloor. Nearby, a filter feeder sways gently in the current, drawing nutrients into its body. A burrower tunnels through sediment, bringing oxygen into deeper layers and creating new microhabitats. These actions, seemingly small, contribute to the larger dynamics of the ecosystem, illustrating how behavior, metabolism, and chemical environment are inseparably linked. In this dynamic, interconnected world, life is both resilient and experimental. Organisms explore new forms, behaviors, and interactions, testing the limits of their biology. Oxygen provides the energy to support these experiments, and the environment responds in subtle, continuous ways. Together, life and environment form a complex system, a tapestry of interactions that will continue to evolve over millions of years. The expansion of ecosystems during this period marks a turning point in Earth's history. Life has moved beyond microscopic simplicity into a realm of visible complexity. Organisms interact with each other and with their environment in increasingly sophisticated ways. Predation, burrowing, grazing, and filtering are now common behaviors. Supported by oxygen-fueled metabolism, ecosystems are layered, dynamic, and resilient, laying the groundwork for the extraordinary diversification of life that will continue throughout the Paleozoic era. As we drift back through the Cambrian oceans, it is remarkable to consider the scale of transformation achieved in these millions of years. Oxygen has quietly reshaped life, enabling movement, specialization, and interaction. The seas are alive with diversity, complexity, and subtle dynamics. Every organism, from the smallest burrower to the largest predator, contributes to a living, breathing system of interdependence. In these ancient oceans, life is learning to innovate, adapt, and survive in increasingly complex ways. Oxygen is the invisible architect of this complexity, enabling energy-intensive behaviors, larger body sizes, and layered ecosystems. The Cambrian explosion is not just a period of rapid diversification, it is the culmination of billions of years of chemical, geological, and biological preparation. And so, as we leave this thriving, dynamic seascape, we carry with us an understanding of oxygen's transformative role. It is the thread that links chemistry, biology, and environment, enabling life to move from simple beginnings to a world of interaction, innovation, and ecological complexity. The Cambrian oceans are alive, dynamic, and rich with possibility, a testament to the power of oxygen and the persistence of life. As our journey through deep time draws to a close, it is worth pausing to consider the profound transformations that oxygen has wrought on our planet. From its humble beginnings as a byproduct of tiny cyanobacteria billions of years ago, oxygen has reshaped Earth in ways that are almost unimaginable. It has altered the chemistry of oceans and atmosphere, sculpted landscapes, influenced climate, and, most importantly, empowered life to grow, move, and interact with a complexity never before possible. Picture the world in its earliest days of oxygenation. The seas were filled with microscopic life, simple colonies of bacteria performing the slow, steady work of transforming chemistry. At first, oxygen was rare and fleeting, trapped in rocks, absorbed by iron, and only gradually building up in the oceans and atmosphere. Life itself was small, slow, and simple. But over hundreds of millions of years, these tiny organisms achieved something extraordinary. By producing oxygen consistently, they altered the very environment in which life existed, creating possibilities that would only reveal themselves much later. Fast forward to the Ediacaran period, where the first macroscopic organisms begin to emerge. Oxygen levels have risen enough to support larger bodies, more cells, and more energy-intensive behaviors. The seas are dotted with soft, alien creatures, discs, ribbons, and other subtle forms that drift, sway, and interact with their environment in ways invisible to the casual observer. Each movement, each subtle interaction is powered by the energy that oxygen provides, linking chemistry, biology, and the dynamics of life itself. As the Cambrian period unfolds, the world becomes even more vibrant. Hard parts appear, predators glide through the water, grazers maintain microbial mats, burrowers reshape sediments, and complex food webs emerge. Oxygen fuels these behaviors, allowing energy to flow efficiently through ecosystems. Life no longer simply exists. It experiments, innovates, and interacts. Mobility, sensory perception, predation, and ecological specialization all depend on the invisible power of oxygen, transforming the oceans into a dynamic, interdependent system. The story of oxygen is, in many ways, the story of life itself. Without oxygen, multicellular life would likely have remained microscopic, constrained to simple forms with minimal interaction. The energy provided by oxygen enabled life to explore size, structure, behavior, and ecological interaction. Every predator, every burrow, every grazing motion in the Cambrian seas is a testament to the transformative power of a single molecule. Oxygen is both a catalyst and a constraint, enabling complexity while imposing evolutionary pressures that drive innovation. It is fascinating to reflect on the subtle interplay between life and environment. Oxygen was initially a product of life, yet it became a force that reshaped life's possibilities. Microbial photosynthesis altered ocean chemistry, oxygen levels rose, and life responded by growing, moving, and interacting in increasingly complex ways. Predation, mobility, and specialization emerged, all supported by the chemical energy of oxygen. Ecosystems became layered, dynamic, and interdependent. The planet had been transformed, not by a sudden event, but by slow, persistent change over billions of years. Consider the modern implications of this story. Every breath we take today is a direct legacy of that first oxygen. Every organism, every ecosystem, and every complex interaction in the natural world owes its existence to the persistent work of microscopic life over eons. Oxygen is not merely a gas. It is the invisible architect of Earth's biosphere. The energy it provides powers motion, metabolism, growth, and interaction at every level of life, from single cells to entire ecosystems. Reflecting on the Cambrian seas once more, we can visualize a world alive with motion. Trilobites crawl along the seafloor, their segmented bodies moving with precision as they search for food or avoid predators. Filter feeders sway gently in currents, capturing nutrients suspended in the water. Burrowers move beneath sediments, aerating layers and creating microhabitats for other organisms. Predators glide silently, scanning for prey, while grazers maintain the microbial mats that form the foundation of the ecosystem. Every organism, every subtle interaction is linked to the energy made available by oxygen. The expansion of ecosystems during the Cambrian period illustrates a profound principle. Life and environment are inseparable. Oxygen enabled life to grow larger, move faster, and interact more effectively, while life itself continues to influence the chemistry, structure, and dynamics of the environment. This feedback loop has been ongoing for billions of years, shaping the trajectory of evolution and the emergence of complex ecosystems. Even the climate and ocean chemistry are intertwined with oxygen levels. Rising oxygen reduced methane concentrations, stabilized temperatures, and allowed stratification of oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor zones in the oceans. These gradients created habitats that life could exploit, enabling specialization, adaptation, and diversification. The environment responded to the presence of oxygen just as life did, and the result was a planet increasingly capable of supporting complex, dynamic ecosystems. Now, imagine the ripple effects of this transformation. The innovations of the Cambrian period, hard parts, mobility, predation, sensory perception, and ecological specialization set the stage for the subsequent evolution of life. Organisms became increasingly capable of influencing their environment, creating new ecological niches, and driving further diversification. Oxygen had provided the energy, and life had seized the opportunity, producing an explosion of innovation that would continue to shape the Earth for hundreds of millions of years. Above the oceans, the atmosphere had become a stable reservoir of oxygen, buffered by interactions with nitrogen and other gases. This allowed shallow waters to become safe habitats, protected from harmful ultraviolet radiation by the emerging ozone layer. Life could venture into new environments, explore new behaviors, and experiment with new strategies. Oxygen provided not just the power to survive, but the energy to explore, innovate, and interact. As we drift toward the present, it is worth contemplating the scale of time involved. Billions of years of subtle chemical accumulation, slow evolutionary experimentation, and ecological feedback culminated in the visible, dynamic ecosystems we began to see in the Cambrian. The history of oxygen is therefore both ancient and ongoing. It is a story of persistence, of gradual accumulation, and a profound transformation. Life today, from the smallest bacterium to the largest whale, continues to rely on the legacy of oxygen. Every ecosystem, from coral reefs to rainforests, is shaped by the availability of energy that oxygen provides. Every movement, every interaction, every complex behavior is ultimately powered by the invisible work of a molecule that began its rise billions of years ago. Reflecting on this connection offers a sense of continuity, linking the deep past to the present in a seamless chain of cause and effect. The story of oxygen is also a story of patience and persistence. The first oxygen-producing organisms were tiny, unassuming, and largely unnoticed in their time. Yet over eons, their slow, steady activity transformed the planet, enabling life to reach heights of complexity and diversity that were previously unimaginable. It is a reminder that even the smallest actions, sustained over time, can have transformative effects on the world. As we conclude our journey, we can imagine the quiet, sunlit oceans of the Cambrian, alive with subtle motion and interaction. We can picture the first burrowers reshaping sediments, predators gliding silently, and grazers maintaining the foundation of ecosystems. We can imagine the energy of oxygen flowing through every cell, enabling movement, growth, and interaction. This is the legacy of oxygen, a force that transformed chemistry into life, simplicity into complexity, and a quiet planet into a living world. And so, as you rest tonight, consider the invisible architect that shaped every breath, every movement, and every interaction you see around you. The oxygen that fills our atmosphere, that powers our metabolism, and that sustains the living world is a direct legacy of Earth's deep past. From microscopic cyanobacteria to the vibrant Cambrian seas, from soft-bodied ediacaran organisms to the first complex predators, oxygen has been the silent, persistent engine driving life's complexity. The story of oxygen is a story without end. It continues in every cell, every ecosystem, and every interaction on our planet today. It reminds us that life and environment are inseparably intertwined, that transformation is possible even through subtle, persistent forces, and that the earth we inhabit is the result of billions of years of patient, gradual change. Thank you for joining this journey through deep time, through chemistry, biology, and evolution. As you drift back to your own present, remember the legacy of oxygen, the invisible thread connecting billions of years of history, shaping the world you see and powering the life around you. Every breath you take is a quiet celebration of that legacy, a continuation of a story that began billions of years ago and continues every moment. As our journey through Earth's deep past comes to a close, take a moment to breathe and reflect. The oxygen that fills our atmosphere, that powers every heartbeat, every motion, every life on this planet, is the quiet legacy of billions of years of transformation. From microscopic cyanobacteria to the vibrant seas of the Cambrian, from silent chemical changes to the rise of complex ecosystems, oxygen has shaped the world in ways both subtle and profound. Thank you for joining this exploration of Earth's ancient history. May the calm of the past stay with you, and may curiosity continue to guide your journey.